All right, welcome to Talks at New Haven. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Robinson, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host,
Alton Booth.
And on today's episode, Alton and I are going to be discussing Abraham interceding for Sodom in Genesis 18:22 through 33, and shouldn't probably be a super long episode today. Today's text is kind of a transitional text leading us.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And so before we get in, Alton, how you doing today, pal?
Doing pretty good. We'll apologize for being a little late.
Yeah.
We ran into some technical difficulties right before we started recording our podcast for Thursday.
Yes.
And then our podcast for Thursday also went a little long. We went just over an hour on it.
Yes, we did.
So we're a little late getting started here. We appreciate you all waiting around and joining us now.
Yeah, you guys will be able to hear the fruit of that lateness. We're going to be releasing an episode on Charles Finney in our Revival versus Revivalism series. That'll release on Thursday. That'll be audio only on our podcasting platform, so you guys will have to subscribe to be able to listen to that. But yeah, so should be good though. Good conversation. Really good conversation.
Yeah, we condensed it a little bit at the end because we were already running long.
Yeah.
It could have easily gone an hour and a half if we wanted to.
Yeah, it could have. Easy. All right, so with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and get into this evening's text. And so the Lord says through Moses, "So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, 'Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?' And the Lord said, 'If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake.' Abraham answered back and said, 'Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? And he said, 'I will not destroy it if I find 45 there.' Again he spoke to him and said, 'Suppose 40 are found there.' He answered, 'For the sake of 40 I will not do it.' Then he said, 'Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there.' And he answered, 'I will not do it if I find 30 there.' He said, 'Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there.' He said, 'For the sake of 20 I will not destroy it.' Then he said, 'Oh, let not the Lord be angry, I will speak again but this once. Suppose 10 are found there.' He answered, 'For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it.' And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place." So that's our text for this evening. And some interesting things in here, and we'll just take it from the top.
Yep, so we'll start here in verse 22, and we'll just work our way through the text. In verse 22 it says, "So the men turned from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord."
Yep.
So this is following up on last week's passage, the beginning of chapter 18, where we saw Abraham sitting out under the tree, and he saw 3 men appear to him. These 3 men approached him, and you can see through the passage, Abraham realized that he's speaking to God himself.
Yes.
And then we saw at the end of last week's passage, the men say, where was it? God say to the men, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do?
Yeah. Seeing
that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation." So then he talks for a minute and he says, "I will go down to see whether they have done altogether."
Yeah.
Or back up to verse 20. "Then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me, and if not, I will know."
Yeah.
So here's God saying, okay, I've heard really bad things about what's going on in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yep.
I'm going to go down and see if that's true. Now, this is an instance of God condescending to man.
Right.
Right? He's giving himself human attributes so that we can understand what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
God's not going down there just because he's heard people say things.
Right.
And he's not going down there to see what's really happening.
Yeah.
He already knows.
Right.
He knows what's going on down there, and that's why he is going there.
Yeah. We see similar language from verses 16 through 21 to the Babel account, which we talked about this a little bit last week with Travis. I've traced that out a little bit more in this week's text. There's actually three kind of parallels going on here. It's literary design. In verses 16 through 21, the language is reminiscent of what we see in Babel. So God says what? I'm going to go down to Babel.
See what man has done.
See what man has done. And so the same language is used here. And then we'll get to these here in a minute. But in 22 through 24, the language here is reminiscent of the Noah story, right? So Abraham asked God if he's going to sweep away the righteous with the unrighteous, right? Which I think has something to do with Lot's wife being turned to a pillar of salt later on, because salt relates to...
It could.
Yeah, so I'm going to dig... I'm thinking about that. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. But anyway, so you've got that. So God, in the Noah account, sweeps away the wicked and preserves the righteous, right? And then in 25 through 33, there's a parallel back to Adam, where he says to the Lord, "I'm but dust and ashes." Right. So what's God say to Adam after the curse?
From dust you were formed, and to dust you will return.
That's exactly right. So here's what I think is going on in this text. I think that Moses is kind of wrapping all of these things up together in some ways, and what he's doing is he's showing that Abraham is this new Adam, right, who has a covenant that the Lord has made with him. He's sitting under a tree, right, parallel there. And then he's also like a new Noah. God made a covenant with Noah, but also he's kind of like this ark, right? Those who are in Sodom, they're outside of the covenant, and so God's going to destroy them, right? And those who are going to come out of the city into the covenant of God, they're going to be preserved. So I think he's being depicted as a new Noah. But then I also think that there's an account here with Babel, right? So what's God do? He scatters Babel, right? The city's left off. It's going to be the same with Sodom and Gomorrah. Right. He's going to destroy it, and then after that, they're going to leave off and never rebuild it again. It's going to be really similar to Babel.
Right.
So
starting off here in verse 22, it says, "The men turned from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord." So we've seen the Lord here pictured as three men, right? This could be a Trinitarian thing.
Yep.
I wonder about it because we don't see any other instance in the Old Testament of God appearing, like God the Father appearing as a man. Right? When God the Father appears, he appears as a burning bush, or a pillar of fire, or a pillar of smoke, things like that. When we see someone appearing as a man, it is usually the Son, correct?
Right.
Jesus appears as Melchizedek. So it's this passage is a little odd in that sense,
For sure.
And there's not really any way to figure out exactly who we're talking about here with three men.
No, it's just one of those mysteries.
So two of the men leave, and Abraham is still speaking to the Lord. And then verse 23 is where things start to get interesting. "Then Abraham drew near and said, 'Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?'" So like you were pointing out, that's where we start to see a little bit of flood language, right? What does a flood do?
Yeah,
the waters rush in and it sweeps everything away.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
So he asks God, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?"
Yeah.
Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. So I think we looked this up before, and Sodom was a city of, what was it, about 200,000?
Yeah, something like that.
I think was the number estimated. A city of around 200,000. Are there 50 righteous among those 200,000 people?
You would think, but apparently there's not.
So, "Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Then Abraham gets a little bold here, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, he does.
Like he's telling God how to be God.
Yeah.
Almost in verse 25.
Yeah.
Far be it from you to do such a thing,
Yeah.
to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked.
Yeah.
Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? Like, that's bold. That's one of the, if your child spoke to you that way, you would smack them.
Right.
Like, just being honest, that's
Yeah.
really bold for a subordinate to speak that way.
Yeah, it is.
But God didn't get mad.
No.
He just said, verse 26, the Lord said, if I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake.
Yeah.
So this passage is not really God and Abraham bargaining.
No.
Like Abraham's trying to,
Yeah.
but God already knows the outcome. Abraham can take the number as low as he wants to.
Yep. God already has the plan here.
Right. You're not going to get to a number low enough
Yeah.
that God is going to go down and find that many righteous.
Yeah. There's an interesting more structure to this passage here too, and I noted this in this morning's sermon. There is a chiasm right here. There's two chiasms in this passage, and we'll get to the other one here in a minute. But in this first one here, the suppose there's 50 righteous is the center of the chiasm. So all of the numbers are the center of both of in the center of both of these chiasms. But this is where that chiasm ends, is in this little paragraph right here.
Yep.
And
So then we get down into verse 27. And this is after God says, if I find 50 righteous, I won't destroy the city.
Yep.
Verse 27, Abraham answered
Yep.
and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord.
Yep, that's the first part of this.
I who am but dust and ashes. So this is what you were talking about with the reference back to Adam.
Yep.
So I am who is the lineage of Adam, right?
I'm going to go back into the ground.
Exactly. I'm a mortal being is basically what he's saying here.
Yep.
And then he says, suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking.
Yep.
Okay, so say you find 50 righteous, but 5 of them aren't righteous enough.
Yep.
Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5?
Right.
And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Again, he spoke to him and said, suppose 40 are found there.
Yep.
He answered, for the sake of 40, I will not do it.
Yep.
Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry. So even Abraham knows he's starting to get annoying at this point.
Right. Yeah.
And I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there.
Yep.
He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. So this is the second time he said this.
Yep. Repetition.
Suppose 20 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry.
Repeat himself again.
Really, really aware that he's being annoying at this point.
Yeah.
And I will speak again, but this once. Okay, this is the last time. I'm not going to ask any more after this.
Yeah.
Suppose 10 are found there.
Yeah.
He answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it.
Yep.
So the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
Yep.
So we've looked at this passage here, and we see Abraham starts off and he says, well, what if there's 50 righteous people there?
Yep.
You won't destroy that entire city if there's 50 righteous, will you? And God says, no, if there's 50 righteous, I'll leave it alone.
Yep.
And Abraham gets him all the way down to agreeing to save the city if there's 10 righteous. Now, we know from reading later on in Scripture, he does not find 10 righteous.
That's right.
God knew at this time he wasn't going to find 10 righteous.
Yeah.
So, just to put it into perspective, in a city the size of Sodom, so say there were 250,000,
Yeah.
right? We have 250 million people in the United States.
Right.
So to find 10 righteous in Sodom would be the same as finding, 10,000 righteous in the United States?
Yeah.
You know, the number of people you can find in certain churches in a
Right.
single building on a Sunday morning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty wild for comparison, but
So that's how many righteous people you needed. In a country the size of the United States, you needed the city of Madison to be righteous people
Yeah.
to save the entire country.
Yeah, puts things into perspective. That's pretty wild. Honestly, this passage is really straightforward. Like it's this second part here, the second paragraph from 27 to 33 is also a chiasm. Mm-hmm. You can note that there's a ton of repetition in it.
Right.
And so the main point, and this is what I said in this morning's sermon, the main point of this passage, the main theme is Abraham interceding on their behalf. He's annoying for sure, but the numbers, right? 50, 45, 30, 20, 10, right? He is interceding on their behalf. And one of the things that I made note of this morning is that in the same way that Abraham interceded for others, Jesus Christ also does the same for us, right? And so we have to ask the question, what does the word intercede mean? Well, it means to do on behalf of someone else, right? That's what it means to intercede for someone, to do something on their behalf. So what is it that Jesus Christ does on our behalf? What is it that he does to intercede for us? Well, the Apostle Paul in Romans 8:34 says this. He says, "Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died," right? And then more than that, who was raised from the dead, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us.
Right.
Right? So what is it that Jesus Christ has done to intercede for us? He says he died, and then he was raised again, right? So he dies this substitutionary death for our sins, right? His righteousness imputed to us by faith. Majorly on my brain right now after reading Charles Finney today. That's what he does. That's how he intercedes for us. But not only that, but it says after this, he says, he is at the right hand of God who indeed is interceding for us. So
right.
Jesus is interceding for us at the right hand of God. What does that mean? Well, in the same way that Abraham is pleading for God to, hey, don't destroy them. It's kind of, communication with God is similar to prayer, I guess you could say. Abraham is doing that, and so that's what Jesus is doing as well. He is interceding with his Father. Hey, these are mine. Don't. I know that one there just slipped up,
right?
Right, but the wrath of God is put on Christ, not on us, and so that's what he does in interceding for us.
Right. So we see here that God is set to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah.
That's right.
The reason he is destroying these cities is because of their unrighteousness. Right? So what is it that saves people from that destruction? They are saved by being righteous.
That's right.
So this is, like you said, this is a lot of talk about what we just talked about before we came on the air with Charles Finney.
Right.
But spoiler for everybody, Finney did not believe in any of this.
No.
But we need a righteousness to be saved.
That's right.
We cannot be saved unless we are counted as righteous.
That's right.
So that's what Paul gets at. That we have received that righteousness, not by any works,
right,
that no man can boast,
Ephesians 2,
but fully as a gift
of
God. We have received the righteousness that we need. And who do we receive it through? Through our intercessor.
That's right.
Through the only intercessor.
That's right.
So if we're going to go after the revivalists, we may as well take shots at the Catholics too. We get that through the only intercessor between man and God, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, that's important. If you don't get that right, then, man, you get a lot of this wrong. And so, so here's where we could kind of start to think about the realm of application here, right? So Jesus is in heaven. He's praying for us, right? He's interceding on our behalf. And it's Jesus' will in the Lord's Prayer that earth would look like heaven. Right? On earth as it is in heaven is the principle there. So here's what I said this morning. Because Jesus prays in heaven, we should also pray and intercede for one another on earth.
Right.
because it's Jesus' will that earth would look like heaven. The church...
Well, if Jesus is an intercessor for the church, and we are called to be Christians, which, what does the word Christian mean?
Being
Christ-like.
Right.
Then should we not do the same for the world?
That's exactly right. That's the exact logic. And so we should be interceding for one another as well. Now, what does that mean? Well, obviously, we should be interceding for, I'll just do this in concentric circles. We should be interceding for our families. We should be interceding for our churches.
Right.
We should be interceding for our cities, our state, if you want to take it wider than that, and then our country. And then maybe if you want to take it wider than that, you could say world. But we should be interceding on behalf of others, praying for them. And in some way, this requires, if we're going to intercede in a way that's personal, that requires being in community with one another. Obviously, in some of this, you have to begin to intercede in a general way, but that's necessary.
Okay. So since this is a shorter episode, we're only 20 minutes in, and we're already getting to the point of wrapping things up. I'm going to bring up a topic here that we can kind of see in this passage, and it's a topic that you may listening have heard this question asked. You may have this question, but as Abraham keeps bringing in lower and lower numbers, and God agrees, is God changing his mind?
Yeah, it's a hot question. Here's what I think. I don't think that he is, because God says, "I change not." And how can someone who knows the outcome of every single situation possibly change his mind? Right? We change our minds based on gaining new information. Right. Like I thought that I was going to go to North Carolina, and I thought that I was going to go this route. But then I ended up finding out that there was a wreck on this route. So I gained new information, and because of that, I change my mind and go another way. God, who is all-knowing, right? He's omniscient. How is it possible for a being who is omniscient to change their mind if they have? And so I would say that they don't. And so what I think is going on here is God is sovereign. He knows the outcome of this event. He knows exactly what he's going to do. He knows the beginning from the end. He knows that John is going to write Revelation. He knows Josh Robinson is going to exist 2,000 years after this is, more than 2,000 years after this in Genesis. He knows it all. And so what I think is he is giving Abraham the opportunity to intercede. And it's not because he's bargaining or changing his mind. He knows exactly what's going to happen, but he's going to give Abraham the opportunity to.
Right. I think there's that.
Yeah.
And I think there is, if you go back earlier in Genesis 18, and something that we talked about with Travis last week, is that God is showing Abraham the depths of the depravity of Sodom. And showing him how to commit justice in Israel as a nation. So by allowing Abraham to set his own terms for what would constitute the saving of Sodom, and then see that Sodom can't even reach that super low bar that Abraham has set. God is showing Abraham how to dish out justice, how to rule justly.
That's really, really good. And I think that you see hints of that even in the text, because Abraham is far being from you. You're the judge of all the earth. Will you not do what is just?
Right.
That's explicitly in the text.
And just before that we talked about last week, looking at verse number 19, God says, "For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice."
So that fits in perfectly here. And so, Israel later on, they're going to go back and they're going to look at this, and this is going to be an example for them in figuring out, them tracing themselves back to Abraham. Like, this is the reason why we do things the way that we do. Abraham learned this, God showed him this, and therefore, this is how we do justice. And then there's the whole thing with the literary parallels here, and they're going to connect this back to other people, and they're going to connect it back even further than themselves. They're going to connect it back to Babel and the justice done there. They're going to connect it back to Noah and the justice done there, and then they're going to connect it back to the curse put on Adam and Eve and the justice done there. So it fits in perfectly thematically.
Right. And so also looking at going back a little bit to the God changing his mind, let's look at some implications of the thought that God changes his mind.
Yeah.
Right? So we know we serve a sovereign God who does as he wills. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So at this moment, God has decided that everyone who has been made righteous has been justified through the substitutionary atonement of Jesus Christ. If we serve a God who can change his mind, what if he changed his mind about that?
Yeah.
How terrifying of a thought is it that God would change his mind and say, well, now the only way you can be justified is by perfectly keeping the law.
Yeah. That's not a God you can trust. And ultimately, taking this out to a metaphysical level here and talking in terms of being, if God changes his mind, then he's not God.
Right.
Because that means that he takes in new information that he did not know, and then because of that, he changes his mind. And a God who changes his mind based on the incoming information that is new does not know everything, and then by definition cannot be God.
Yep.
So, self-defeating.
So that's about all we have for this episode. I know it was short, about 25 minutes. If you want more, you can listen Thursday when we went for an hour.
Yeah, we did go through. Yeah.
You can pick up on it there.
Yeah.
Next week we're going to be starting Genesis 19.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, you're going to be spending about 3 weeks in Genesis 19.
Yeah, if there's 3 divisions in the text, I probably will.
I don't think there's 3 divisions, but that's what. Yeah, there are 3 divisions there. So
yeah, God
that's
rescued Lot.
That was just what Derek told me earlier. You were planning on 3 weeks there.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
So,
I've seen him the divisions in the text.
So we're going to be starting with God rescuing Lot.
Yep.
Next week. So we're going to get into Lot, his wife, those kind of things over the next couple weeks.
Yep.
So if you all have any kind of questions or anything, you can feel free to send those to us. So you can send them to us. You can comment them here on the videos, either on Facebook or on YouTube. You can send us a message on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/NewHavenWV.
Yep.
And you can find us there. You can send us any questions you have. You can go to our website, www.newhavenwv.com. Click the resources tab and click Talks at New Haven. And there's a place there where you can submit an email. Or you can go to our Instagram, @Talks at New Haven. And there you can send us questions. And we'll do our best to answer those questions. Make sure you're subscribed to our podcasts so that you will get the audio-only episode Thursday.
Yeah.
Make sure you're leaving us a review on our podcasts. Also, one thing I don't usually point out, but I will today, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And you've got the notifications turned on so that you get notified when we go live 25 minutes later than we're supposed to.
That's right.
Those kind of things.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And,
so, you have anything else you want to add? Any kind of books you want to plug? Anything like that before we wrap up?
Well, you two know that I am a #1 best-selling author now. No, I know that everybody from New Haven is cracking up at that because that's been the joke all day. And so, no, I don't want to plug any books. I've been doing that enough on my personal social media. But I do want to encourage people to check out the Revival versus Revivalism series. That series so far has been smoking hot. I mean, it is like a lot of theology. There's a lot of just good stuff in that. And it's relevant to where we're at here in the coal fields. And I think it'll be a really good resource for people in learning perhaps like what sets us apart and the tradition that we're from versus what they're used to seeing. It'll give a lot of justification for why there's a difference there. So.
Yep. All right, so we will be back next week, starting into Genesis 19.
Yep.
So hopefully you all will join us then.
See you then.